Good evening, everyone. Welcome. My name is Father Stuart Clem. I'm one of the priests here at the Church of St. Michael and St. George. We're very happy to be hosting this event and just want to extend a warm welcome and let you know that if you ever find yourself looking for a church home, you're more than welcome to join us here at one of our services we have every Sunday. And even if you're not looking for a church home, you're more than welcome to join us for one of the many wonderful programs that we have to offer, especially as we're looking ahead to this upcoming Advent season. We have sung services of Advent lessons and carols and Christmas lessons and carols. If you're interested in any of those, you can find more information on our website. But in any case, we're very glad that you're here and happy to be hosting and very happy to be partnering with the Carver Project. So before we get started, I'd like to open us with a word of prayer. Heavenly Father, who has made all things and whose creation displays your marvelous handiwork, we give you thanks for those who help us to understand the world you have created in all its beauty and complexity. We ask that you would bless this gathering here tonight as we discern more deeply how you might be calling us to live in this complex world. We give you thanks for the Carver Project and ask your blessing on its staff and all its ministries. May we leave here this evening with a renewed sense of purpose and a shared sense of mission. We ask all this in the name of your Son, Jesus Christ, our Lord, who lives and reigns with you in the Holy Spirit, one God, forever and ever. Amen.
Good evening, and I just want to take a few moments to say thank you, a big thank you to Father Stuart, Marty, John, Louisa, just for taking the time to help us plan this event. This is the third in this series of faculty forums organized by the Carver Project. My name is Penina Laker. I am an associate professor of communication design at WashU and the incoming executive director of the Carver Project. The Carver Project, for those of you who might not know, we do have these flyers that have a little bit more information on what we do, but we are a Christian ministry, a nonprofit organization that is faculty founded and faculty led, and our mission is to empower Christian faculty and students to serve and connect university, church, and society. So we are trying to create community amongst ourselves because, being Christians at a secular university is not always the most popular thing, but we're also trying to bridge the divides that sometimes tend to exist between the church and the university. So through the Carver events that we have, you get to hear from different faculty who are working to think about how their scholarship and vocation come into conversation. Today's conversation with Jen Heemstra is just a little taste of what we on a monthly basis as faculty do. So one of the things that the Carver Project that helps us build community and helps us make connections with other faculty who are Christian and WashU's campus is we have these monthly dinners. And during the monthly dinners, we not only break bread and have a meal together, but we've for a few years now had a faculty member take some time to share about what they do. It could be teaching related, it could be research, and also share about their journey. And because those have been so wonderful, for someone like me who's at the Sam Fox School, in the design school, those dinners have been a great way for me to learn a little bit more about my colleagues at the med school, what they're doing at the Danforth campus. We have a lot of schools there, so this faculty forum became an opportunity for us to sort of peel back the curtain a little bit and give you guys a glimpse into what happens in those dinners. And today you're all going to be in for a special treat because Jen truly enjoys what she does. Jen is the chair and Charles Allen Thomas Professor of Chemistry, and I still remember the first dinner that Jen attended. Jen is very enthusiastic and very happy, and she was coming into a new role to become chair of chemistry, which can feel very daunting, but she genuinely was excited to be at WashU, and you could tell that she had this extra pep in her step, and that has not been deemed, which I am so excited to see. And she'll just share some of those tips and tricks, because when you're chair of a department, it's not the most exciting job, but Jen definitely makes that role seem quite attractive. So I am delighted to introduce you all to Jen Heemstra. So in here, I'm sure you've all seen there's a really extensive bio. Jen is prolific in what she does. The Heemstra Lab does a lot of science things. I won't even try to get them, but they're great, fantastic. We'll learn a little bit more about that. Jen is also a new author of a book that is out for sale as well. You're more than welcome to grab a copy for yourself, called Labwork to Leadership, a concise guide to thriving in the science job you are not trained for. Jen describes herself as a chemistry professor who loves to talk about her emotions. We just talked about this a couple days ago. And those two things don't usually go hand in hand, but they've also been the things that have made Jen not only a prolific researcher, but also just remarkably relatable. Her book offers lessons that are not only relevant for the scientific lab setting, the book title is Labwork, but truly there are a lot of great lessons and themes there that are easily translatable into managing just everyday leadership type scenarios. I also love that Jen is a generous storyteller who has had a remarkable journey to where she is today. I'm excited for us to hear some of these stories, including, again, Jen is one of those people I've come to learn who does not shy away from her failures. In fact, she's always willing to share what her failures are, as well as successes, and how those experiences have gone on to shape her career trajectory. So our larger umbrella, larger topic is this evolution of purpose. I'm sure we've all at some point had to wrestle with or think about, what is my purpose? What is this reason for me being here? And Jen is sort of going to help us unpack that. So Jen, I would love to welcome you to our little setup here, and we will get started as soon as I turn on my microphone. Okay. Oh no, I think I'm on. All right, can you hear me? Okay, I'll try to be, I'm sure they can adjust me and make me louder.
And make me quieter.
No, you are fine. Okay. One quick housekeeping thing that I failed to mention was there's a QR code on the back of the insert. So as we go along in this conversation, if you have any questions or comments, those are welcome too. Do leave one using the QR code. Once Jen and I have had a few moments to talk, we'll probably talk for about 45 minutes. We'll open it up for Q&A to sort of extend the conversation. So please don't be shy. Share with us. We'd love to hear from you. All right, so here we go. All right, so Jen, I recently listened to a podcast called Reciprocity, where you mentioned becoming a scientist because, can you not hear me? Can you hear me? Okay, I'll move it right here. Is that better? Technology. Okay. So I recently listened to a podcast where Jen was talking about her journey and the book, but one thing that struck me was I learned that when Jen was in 8th grade, she had a teacher that told her she was bad at science, and she was not allowed to take biology. It's one thing for someone to tell you you're bad at something, but then to go on and instruct you not to even try to get into a class, that was not very nice. So that also meant that she wasn't consequently allowed to join the science Olympiad, which I'm guessing maybe was a big thing. So I would love to start with that story, Jen, as you tell us a little bit more about, this experience and how that consequently actually led you to pursue the sciences.
Yeah, thanks for asking about that. It's funny, if my spouse or kids were here, they would say, oh, well, it was pretty obvious, because if you want me to do something, you should just tell me that I can't, and then I will do it out of spite. Mm-hmm. And so they probably could have predicted for you that I'm just stubborn enough that I would have been like, oh, you think I can't do science? I will spend my whole life doing it just to show you you're wrong. But really, the story behind that is that when I was heading into 9th grade, this is really going to date me, but hopefully it'll be relatable. You had to wait in line to get up to the front to this table where your guidance counselor sat with a little card file, and they would pull out the 3x5 card with your name on it, and tell you what classes you were allowed to take in ninth grade. And all my friends were ahead of me, and they would come back and they're like, oh yeah, I got into biology. And I was like, cool, yeah, I'm going to take biology too. I thought I was good at science. And then I got up there, and my guidance counselor was like, oh, you're not approved to take biology. And I was like, what? And she was like, oh yeah, your 8th grade teacher said that you were not skilled at science. And I'm sure like it was like I didn't memorize the carbon cycle very well or something silly like that. But it actually had, well, hilariously, I took keyboarding instead. And so probably most of us here, like that's actually like probably more useful for a lot of, I write like 10,000 words a day by email. So, and I'm really fast at it now thanks to 9th grade keyboarding. But I think in a lot of ways that led me to go into science, because then at the same time I had, you know, a home life that like you didn't really want to go home after school, you know, like you kind of had to like stay away and then like kind of glide in at dinner time, grab some food, assess the situation, figure out if you're going to like go back out or kind of hide in your room and do your homework, and whatever it was going to be. And so I needed something to do after school. And all my friends were like, oh, you should join Science Olympiad. And I was like, no, I'm bad at science, right? And they're like, no, the teacher is really, really wonderful. And actually, Dr. Marcia Sprang was the coach and teacher for that. And I mean, she ended up like literally saving my life later in high school. But I remember walking into the classroom and she was like, welcome to Science Olympiad. I was like, I'm bad at science. She was like, well, what are you talking about? I was like, well, everyone else is like in biology, so they're doing all these like genetics or whatever environment events, and I'm not in I'm not taking any science classes. And I will never forget this. She looked at me and she goes, well, we have a geology one, and no one gets to take geology, so you can do that. Here's these like egg cartons. There's this whole box of egg cartons with like 200 different rocks, you know, one in each well, and you'd pick it up and it'd say what it was. And so I just dove in and loved it. But I think that was one of those first lessons in purpose, because, you know, you could say it found me, but it was one of those times where if someone had said, oh, you're really good at science, you should totally do this, I might have been scared out of it or felt too much pressure. But I had this amazing opportunity where like nobody was expecting anything of me.
Right.
No one was, I was just like, oh, that sad girl who like couldn't take 9th grade biology, but is like off memorizing the rocks in the back of the room because she can't go home after school. But it was amazing. And I fell in love with it. And I think it was possible because I could just do this thing that was totally intrinsically motivated and just for fun and not have to worry about what anyone else thought, or not have to worry if it would ever become a career for me. And then of course that teacher, after like a few months, was like, wait, so why are you not in biology? And I was like, oh, I was told I was bad at science. And she was like, oh, and like, okay, we'll get you back on track. And you know, became one of my core role models over time.
That's awesome. It's actually interesting because I think about your story, and it has me reflecting on my story, which is the opposite of that. I had a teacher in primary 6, which is probably the equivalent of, I don't know, 5th, 6th grade, tell me because I was really good at math and art. I'll never forget this day because he told me, you are going to become an architect. It wasn't that like, you could become an architect, you should look into it. He told me you're going to be an architect. And there's something about hearing those words. I took it as this mandate that I need to pursue this because my teacher told me.
Yeah.
And there's something about teachers when you're, especially in those early formative years, you really take their words, you know, to heart. And interesting enough, by the time I came to college, I was still working towards becoming an architect, and in a lot of ways, I closed myself off of any other areas of study because I was like, no, if it's not math or fine arts or something, I shouldn't even like take it. But I encountered a liberal arts education when I came to the US, and we were kind of forced to take a lot of general education classes, and I'm like, what do you mean? I want here to become an architect. I need to start studying architecture. And then I stumbled in a design class, and then I was like, after the first day, I was like, I do not know how to turn on the computer. So how am I going to figure out Photoshop and how to design? And I walked up to the teacher and I told her, I'm so sorry, I don't want to waste your time, but I need to drop this class. And she's like, why? It's because I don't even know how to turn on the computer. She's like, no, if you're interested, sit right there. I'll find, I'll find a tutor, I'll find someone to help you. But if you're interested, I'm willing to work with you. And fast forward, I sort of like eventually felt like I had permission to pursue something that was not architecture. So I do agree that there is just like something freeing about not having expectations thrust on you. But it's so it's interesting because it was a good thing that he told me, but then it kind of.
Well, and I think it gets at the top. I know I'm like totally messed up here. You're playing questions here. But it gets at the topic though that like there's this messaging of like you have to find your thing. You have to find that one thing. And so we're so hungry for that, or like so there's so much anxiety around I have to find that thing that if someone hands it to you, you're just like, okay, that's it. Like I'm holding on to this and this is my thing now. Whereas it really can be anything.
A lot of things, and that actually leads us into this next sort of like question that sort of picks up that theme. So, we're talking about this idea of purpose and that aspect of purpose that can often be very stressful, especially at the college level when you're trying to figure out your major of study and you have to declare something at some point. How did you decide to specifically become a chemist? So there's a whole like, okay, now you made it through the Olympiad, you're like, I can do science. Chemistry.
I did. Well, I will admit, this might be heartwarming to some. I say this openly in chemistry departments and in curriculum meetings that I'm like, when I went to college, chemistry was not at all on my radar as something that I thought I would do. And my first year chemistry class did absolutely zero to change that impression for me. And so if you're, I always tell people like, look, if you hated Gen Chem, it's okay. Like you could still be a chemist. Maybe you just didn't have the right teachers and hopefully we do that better here at WashU. But it just was only a little piece of it. So I went into college thinking, for a while I wanted to be an astronomer. And then I somehow talked myself out of that. Actually, I think I just fell in love with genetics. It was the 90s, the Human Genome Project was happening. It was so exciting. And so I decided I was going to be a biology major. Although really the whole other story to that is that my family was convinced that I should. Well, my dad was like, go whatever. He never got to go to college. He was like, whatever, go do this thing and have fun. And my mom was like, okay, here's the deal. You're going to college, you need to make sure you meet a husband. Because if you don't meet a husband, then you'll have to get a job. And I hate my job. And so that was kind of the motivation I had. Actually, when I became a chemist, my mom was really upset. Because she was like, you will never meet a man. And I was like, yeah, they're everywhere. It's fine.
Especially in chemistry.
Yeah, my family's all right. So I was going, but I at least thought like, okay, well, I got to major in something, so let's figure this out. So I was going to do sort of genetics, molecular biology. But then, actually, John and I were talking about this before we started, that I got there and the culture in the biology major and the culture among pre-meds was just so cutthroat and competitive that I just couldn't handle it. And I was just like, I don't want to spend time in these places. And so I got to a place where I would go on the first day and get the syllabus. This is so bad to admit now that I'm a professor. I would go get the syllabus, and then I would only show up to class when there was like a quiz or a test, or I would like scoot in, turn in my homework, and leave. And then before every exam, I'd learn nothing because I'd not been to lecture. So I'd like cram the whole evening before, show up, and I could get a B. It wasn't great, but I could get a B. And then go on my way. And about a year in, I realized, well, A, I'm getting Bs and I'm gonna lose my scholarship because I had to keep a certain GPA. And number two, I was like, wow, I could probably do this for another, 3 years and graduate with a degree and have learned absolutely nothing about that field. And that would be like a real shame. And so I took a 1-year vacation from my major. I was like, okay, there's this whole sequence of classes. I was like, I'm gonna press pause. And if a year later I wanna get back on the train, I can kind of finish in 4 years still. And I just explored. I was at a big state school, but I gave myself a liberal arts education at big state school. And I did law, constitutional law, and I did psych and social behavior, and criminal justice, and environmental studies. I took bioethics, and I was actually so close to becoming a bioethics lawyer. Wow. That was the plan. I was going to do bioethics law, but the path wasn't real clear, and it wasn't really a thing back then. I was like, I don't really know how I get to that career and what that career looks like, and there's no one really in my family who can help. But then at that time, I was required to do research. And I thought, I have no idea how to join a research lab, but I had a night job. Well, I had a morning job working at a golf course and delivering newspapers, and then I had a night job working in the OChem stock room. So I was like checking out the glassware kits to the students who came to do their labs. And the people who led those labs were graduate student TAs. And so I was like, well, I don't know how to join a lab, really, in anything, but there's like these grad students here, and maybe they could help me join a chemistry lab. And I didn't like hate OChem. I took OChem and I actually kind of liked it. So I was like, that could be cool. Maybe I could do chemistry research. And for reasons I still tell my undergrad advisors, I'm like, I have no idea why you gave me an opportunity to work in your lab. I was so clueless. Like, I was like, oh, I don't know what I want to do with my life. Probably be a lawyer, but like, can I work in your chemistry lab? And he said, sure. And so I worked, and I think this is one of my best lessons for myself in purpose. I spent a whole year then telling people, I was like, oh, I'm working in this chemistry lab, I'm having a blast, it's so much fun doing this research. It's not like what I want to do with my life, but I'm having a lot of fun. And then it took a year, and it took people saying, you should go to grad school, you should go to grad school, you should, before I thought, oh, maybe I could actually be a chemist. And so it kind of just found me. You know, I tell people, like, you know, I think our students expect to find their major, and you know, I tell them, I'm like, you know, there's this picture that like you find your major, your purpose, and like you come upon it, and like, you know, the lights shine down from heaven and the music plays, and like, you know, it's your moment and that's your thing. But it's like, no, it's often just you find something and then you kind of like it and you do it some more and you realize you still like it, and then you do some more and then you're like, oh, actually maybe this is what I could do with my life. And it's not this glitzy, glamorous thing, but it's just something that you find it and evolves over time.
And I think it's so important for students to hear these kinds of stories, because I think oftentimes the university can feel like a place where everyone has it together. And this happens amongst themselves too, where it's like, you know, now I have a major, I know I'm going to study this. I grew up in a culture in Uganda where from 16, you had to know what you were going to be, because your education from that point into advanced high school was curated. So, you know, you were studying from 16 all the way through university to either be a doctor, a lawyer, like whatever it is. So we had that pressure, but that's what everyone did. But I think a place like WashU, and you know, whereas students at some point you have to declare something. I remember in college, I had a lot of friends who were undecided, and I couldn't understand how are you here and undecided? Like, how are you just taking? But I think there is something to that where, you know, you could use especially the formative years of college as a time to explore and to ask those questions. I bet your chemistry teachers who let you in those labs did, because probably not many people asked to join. You know, I don't know.
There were a few undergrads, but not a lot.
Yeah, especially as an undergrad. So I think that's really good advice for students. How about academia? So, you know, how did you end up?
How did I end up in academia?
What led you? Like, you thought you were going to be an astronomer, maybe a lawyer, but now we found chemistry, then academia.
Yeah, so you know, there's when I realized I wanted this job, which was really early, actually. I don't think I could have admitted it to myself, but I remember right before I graduated, I was talking with the guy who had been my boss when I had the stockroom job. And, well, it was so funny. I was interviewing I'll tell the story. Maybe it's a chemistry specific thing, but I was interviewing for this job, and he was like, well, how would you make a 1 molar solution of sodium hydroxide? And I probably just like triggered someone with that question. I'm very sorry. But you had a bad chemistry experience. But I think he was looking for, you know, I think I said something like, oh, well, I would like put 200 mils of water into a volumetric flask, and I would weigh out this much sodium hydroxide and put it in, and I would top it up to this amount, and then I would do this and that. And he was just looking for like, do you know what a mole of sodium hydroxide weighs? And so I realized I'd found something I love, right? That it just, I enjoyed that. And somewhere near, right before I graduated, I was like, yeah, I don't know what I want to do. And he was like, oh, I know exactly where you're going to end up. He's like, you will be a professor. And I was like, yeah, no, there's absolutely no way. But I think too, that was, I spent most of, because I failed in my mission to meet a spouse as an undergrad, so I was allowed to go to grad school. And I grew up in a very conservative, I have a lot of church hurt, but I've walked away from almost everything I grew up believing, but I love Jesus a lot more now. But at the time it was like, okay, well, fine, go to grad school, because, you're not going to make something of your life, you might as well go to grad school. And I mean, my parents were pretty cool about it, but the church was like very, this wasn't really okay. And then I met my spouse, and then it was like, all right, well, now that this PhD thing is done, like the end game is inevitable here. I even told my, probably a lot of people here are familiar with like a advanced candidacy exam during your PhD, right? It's like in your third year, and it's when you officially are like, yes, you can stay and get a PhD. And at the end of that, my thesis committee, these very serious professors at UIUC, they asked me, they're like, oh, what are you going to do after your PhD? And I literally looked at them, I was like, oh, I'm going to stay home and have babies. And they almost died, like the looks on their faces. My PhD advisor, for the record, I mean, he's a Christian, he was amazing. He thought it was hilarious. He was just like, oh yeah, she's like, these guys have no idea what they got themselves into being on this committee. But I really thought that. And so, but in some ways it was freeing, because I put a lot of pressure on myself during my PhD. But I think if I'd had, again, that external pressure of like, okay, I have to get this done so I could get this job, and had that constantly weighing on me, it would have made it really miserable, and I probably would have just burned out under the stress. But because I was like, well, I just get to have fun, and there's like no end game. There doesn't have to be an end game. I'm just here to have a blast. I think I was like, well, I'll be a stay-at-home mom, and I was like, maybe eventually I'll be a substitute teacher. And like, those are great goals, right? Those are amazing things. So anyone who's a stay-at-home mom or a substitute teacher, that's really amazing. It just wasn't what, I should caveat with that like, it wasn't what I wanted to do. Like, I knew what I wanted, and I wanted it so badly, but I was like, no, but I was just told that this is what your life is going to be. I think I shared this at a Carver event, actually, that I remember being in grad school. Sorry, I'm gonna like talk about all that faith stuff, but like, I was in grad school, and we were in the back of a van going to a women's retreat. I think it was the last women's retreat I ever went to, so if you ever like see me not sign up for one, this is why. And we were going, and the person sitting next to me looked at me, and she goes, well, so you're in grad school. It's like, what's your end game? She said, because it's sinful for you to ever work outside of the home.
Oh, man.
And I was like, I actually was like, oh yeah, I know. And again, if that was the path I wanted, I think like freedom in Christ means we get to do whatever we're called to do, and that gets to change over time. If that was what I wanted, that'd be great. And if that's what they wanted, that's great. But it wasn't what I wanted. But I had to like hold that in for so many years. That's what all the energy comes from. I like held that in for like 10 whole years. Freedom! And then we realized we could maybe never have kids, and it broke me, and it made me ask some really hard questions about my faith, and it really changed our lives and changed my career trajectory. But it really was like a thing where for 10 years I knew that this is what I wanted to do. I was like, oh, I love all the freedom of academic research. I love the creativity. It would be so much fun to mentor and teach students, and like, you don't have a boss, and that's pretty awesome. And like, I'm really bad at having a boss. Although everyone knows, it's a chair, I have a boss. But I would say I have a boss for a job that I can quit and still have my job. And so it's okay.
That's true.
Actually, we'll cut that out in case the dean ever hears that. We'll take that out of the recording. But yeah, I knew I wanted this job, and I just thought it was impossible. I was like, well, that would be great, but that's impossible. And then when my life kind of fell apart over, infertility and pregnancy loss, what emerged out of that was, well, maybe I can go after this career that I want. And then we actually did have 2 wonderful kids. And I was like, oh my gosh, I love being home with them, and that's so great. But I was like, but I also want this job. And so I decided to just go for it. I had amazing mentors who said, you know, you really, if this is what you want, you really should just kind of give it a try and at least go for it. And I think since that day that even in my interviews, I remember being on my interviews and thinking, oh my goodness, this is what I've always dreamed of.
Wow.
And I can't believe I'm getting to be here. And I think every day since then, I somehow got a job, and then I somehow got tenure. But every day since then, I just wake up with this sense of wonder of like, oh my goodness, I can't believe I get to do this. Never in my wildest dreams did I think I'd be doing this. And yet here I am.
You're doing it.
And this is my life, and like whatever happens today, it's okay because, you know, I was fortunate that God kind of led me through the ups and downs to be here. And I think there's a lot of people like that, right? It isn't that any one job or career or having a job or not having a job is better, but it's, I think that so much blessing comes from just seeing where you've been led over the years.
Well, it's amazing to see too just how the hand of the Lord, even in that journey, with all these external pressures, career-wise, has just like stayed with you. And the more you know, just allowed yourself to lean into those struggles in His own timing, He was able to still remind you that He's right there with you. And now you're a mom, but you're also doing those academic things. So to sort of dig deeper, a little deeper into this sort of theme of pressure, especially those external pressures, I think many of us, I know I have wrestled with that feeling of, you know, this thing of purpose being fixed and just wanting to find it and wanting the answer right now and not wanting to go through like not knowing and that season of not having clarity and yet wanting to be obedient and fighting it. I know you have a really good story, a 7 Habits story. Could you share with us a little bit more about how you go from like, how you went from sort of like changing that mindset of like this being, and you've kind of touched on that, being fixed to, it's evolving. We're all on this journey and it keeps evolving.
Yeah. Oh yeah. So, so the story goes that I could actually like take you back to where I was. I was an assistant professor at University of Utah, and my PhD advisor had recommended, you know, Stephen Covey's 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, totally classic leadership book. And I was reading it. I'll never forget this. I was like on the exercise bike in our laundry room in our basement of our house in Utah, and I'm pedaling away and reading this book, and it said something like, you know, you have to make sure the ladder is leaned against the right tree, right? Like if you're not pursuing the right goals and if you're not working towards the right thing, then all of that work is totally pointless. And I remember at the time, I was like 3 years into my career. Because of how I'd gotten my job, I was doing research that I thought was really fun, but I couldn't say like, oh, this is gonna change the world or anything, or even like, this is gonna really change anything. But it was a lot of fun and we were learning things, and it was just that, you know, oh, I get to have this job. But I remember being so mad when I read that, and mad at the book and mad at myself, and I put the book down. My bookmark in my Kindle is probably still on that page. And I just shut my iPad and like I think I finished pedaling because I was so mad. But I like walked away from the book because I was like, I felt like I couldn't say that what I was working towards was the most important thing. I was like, I can't in good conscience say that I feel like this research, I thought it was the research. I was like, I can't in good conscience say this research is gonna like change the world or is the most important thing I can be doing with my time. I just don't have better ideas yet. And so I just got super frustrated and walked away from it. But what I didn't realize, and now I've, you know, our research program has evolved. I'm much more excited about it. And not that the work we were doing then wasn't like exciting. I was a new faculty member. We were developing our ideas. We were figuring out what our lab was going to be all about. But what I realize now is that the purpose of what they were talking about, I mean, maybe some people interpret it as the actual research you do, but it wasn't the work that we were doing. It was the how that we were doing it. That really, the tree that the ladder was and should have been leaned against was just about how I was showing up and doing my work every day. It was things like, I'm going to show up and try and be a really good mentor. And I'm going to try and think about leadership differently. And I want to empower people who are in my group. And I want to create positive change in my department. And that actually I was kind of doing the things I wanted to be doing. I just didn't realize that that's what it was about.
And actually in your book, you talk a little bit about this idea of how we should rethink the way we set goals. And I think you're starting to touch into some of those themes of the kinds of questions we should be asking that would actually help us develop and evolve. Could you share a little bit more about what kinds of questions those are? And I know we're getting into your book, we'll get a chance to
I'm really glad that you asked that. And this is something, I know we were going to talk a little bit about how we, the importance of leadership in kind of weathering these uncertain times. And I think that's one of the really huge ones, is that we need to completely rethink how we think about goals, especially right now, because you know, in times of uncertainty, your ability to achieve the goals you set out all of a sudden kind of gets ripped away from us, right? Whether that's, you know, for our students going to grad school, a lot of them aren't going to be able to get into programs like they thought they would, or getting a certain job, or, you know, if you're in leadership, running initiatives for your unit, or hiring more people, or raising more funding for your research. So many of those things are just really not possible right now. And so something we need to think about as leaders is how we create more what I call like resilient goals. How we take away, you know, kind of move away from those metric-based goals, or at least make those secondary. And think about things instead like, how much positive impact can I have in my leadership? Instead of like, okay, I'm going to do X, Y, and Z initiatives. Okay, well, whatever crisis comes our way today, whatever difficult situation comes our way, how much positive impact can I have on the people around me? How well can I lead people through this? Or who do I want to be when I show up to this place every day? Or what do I want to learn today? How am I going to grow as a person? How am I going to grow spiritually? How am I going to grow in my field, in my discipline? And to really bring our goals back into those things that we have control over, because there's so much out there that we just can't control right now.
Yeah, no, so that was really, really good. I thought that was great. I'm going to have us go back to where we should have started with the book. But we're slowly starting to get into this idea of accidental leadership, because you've been very vocal about how you acknowledge that, you know, you ended up in a job that, you know, you weren't really prepared for. And it's sometimes hard, I think, even for just faculty to admit that, wow, I was hired to be a professor, but is my job like a leadership job? Because I'm not sure I know how to do that. But, so talk to us a little bit more about this like larger theme and how you sort of like arrived at that realization of, oh my goodness, this job is actually a leadership job.
Yeah, and I really should have realized it sooner, but we just don't talk about it. That in the sciences, when you get your new faculty job, your first order of business pretty much, you know, next to like ordering equipment for your lab, is to start hiring people. And you're hiring postdocs and undergrads and grad students, and all of those people are going to work in your lab, and it's kind of like being a small business owner. And it's so funny, we talk about leading a lab, but yet we often don't talk about it being a leadership job. But we even use those, we say, oh no, the leadership jobs are being like a chair or dean. So you don't have to worry about leadership till you're gonna be a chair or a dean. But then you find yourself leading this team of individuals like right off the bat, when you're in the pressure cooker of trying to get tenure, you're trying to establish yourself, figure out who you are. And that I think things are getting better in academia in a lot of places, but still we get, you know, compared to the amount of training we get in our discipline, we get like this much training in the leadership and professional skills that we need to be successful. And so I have I talk about in the book some really embarrassing mishaps of realizing I wasn't trained for this job and making mistakes, but then learning and trying to do it better. But something that really stuck with me, I was talking with someone was traveling for a seminar visit last week, and it was the chair of a department. And we were talking about this concept of accidental leadership. You end up in this job you weren't prepared for. And he said, oh yeah, it's like this little shibboleth that we used to like whisper to each other in the hallways. You pass each other and you see that look of desperation and you're like, oh yeah, do you have something happening that you were totally unprepared for? Me too, that happened to me, I'm in that place too. But that we really need to be talking about this more openly, that we end up in these jobs we weren't prepared for, and that's a really massive problem, but we don't have to stay there. We can go out and get these skills and learn how to do these things, and that we really have a duty to do that, no matter where we are, because the people who we lead are counting on us to do that.
Talk about that balance of, so here you are in a leadership position, you're not failing privately anymore,
Now I feel publicly. It's so great.
Things that are happening publicly, but at the same time, you're also trying to build trust in your students and the crew in the lab, and you're also trying to mentor them. Can you talk a little bit about how you've helped kind of use that as a launchpad to build a culture where failure in a lot of ways is seen as inevitable? It's bound to happen, and how you will deal with it as a lab.
Yeah, I made a claim in the book, and then my editor was like, you need a citation for that. And I think I found one. But it's just, I know, I'm a scholar, it's so embarrassing. But it was that people don't necessarily, so we're okay, don't necessarily want to be led by people who never fail or are perfect. They want to be led by people who are authentic and hopeful and really, really care, right? If you think about, or another way to think about it is, if you pause and reflect on all of the people who you respect the most and why you respect them so much, how many of those are because they never ever fail and they're totally completely perfect? In fact, we're mostly like, I hate those people. Right? They're so perfect. What's their deal? And so it's that we have this, can be really tolerant of other people's failures, but then we still get this idea that we have to never fail, or that if we fail, people will lose respect for us. But really, it's not whether or not we fail, it's how we act in the face of failure that determines people's respect for us. And so failure is awful, right? It's terrible. At the same time, it's an opportunity to be our best selves and to show up and still, when we got our first grant proposal rejected, I remember thinking, oh my goodness, my group's gonna be like, oh, that's it. Like, I joined the wrong lab, this person can't get funded. But I was like, you know what? 80% of people, or 90, get their grants rejected. Only 10 to 20% get funded, so I'm not alone. And it was that ability to, thankfully I had learned enough leadership skills that I could show up and say, okay, so like this didn't go well. Right. We failed at this, but that's okay. Here's our strategy, here's how we're gonna move forward, we're gonna try again, and I think that we can ultimately do this. We just need to keep moving, and we need to keep applying, and we need to get more data, and we need to refine our ideas, and this is what we need to do. And so I think failure is an opportunity to actually build trust with the people around you. And I think the really important thing is that the further any of us goes in our lives or our careers, the more people look up to you in whatever domain you're in, whether that's your children or your coworkers or whoever, is that the further we go, the more important it is for us to be authentic about our failures. Because I think people often think, they're beating themselves up for a failure, and meanwhile they think everyone else never fails. And so it's so important to keep sharing about our insecurities, or our failures, or our struggles, because otherwise we just make whatever path we're on look totally unattainable to other people.
And it makes you appreciate and celebrate the wins too so much.
Oh my gosh, yes.
Then when you win, you're like, I know what it feels like to fail. And so now when you get this grant accepted, you're like, and then you want to work harder too, and it becomes a we thing instead of I. let's sort of bring this back a little bit to the church as well, just like the word of the Lord, and just even just how examples in the Bible, how looking at how Jesus called the disciples, you know, you think about how there wasn't like, here's our strategic plan, let's get together, and you know, it's how we're going to conquer. But Scripture does show us that obedience and faithfulness in a lot of ways often precede clarity. Could you just share a little bit more?
Yeah, you're right. Jesus wasn't like, all right, come with me. I'm going to have you chair a committee, and then we're going to develop a strategic plan.
Just like, you know, follow. He's like, you know, be obedient. So and they followed. And
yeah, I think in some ways it's easier, and in a lot of ways it's scarier, right? It's scarier because there's no plan.
Yeah.
But sometimes it's easier too, because you're like, okay, I just need to take that first step, and I don't have to have it all figured out. And I'll say that, I mean, one of the biggest moments of clarity for me in this was that, so I you know, fast forward into academic career, got 5 years in, had my tenure vote, went very poorly, and like was half the people voted against me for tenure. And I did eventually get tenure, but I will never forget that week. That happened on a Friday, and then we actually went to my brother's wedding. But the next week we're in church, and I'm still just like, can't drive to work without sobbing and crying, and then I have to like pull myself together in the parking lot and you go in. But the next Sunday, our pastor, Troy Champ, at a church in Salt Lake, gave a message, and the kind of takeaway bottom line was, God will give you everything you need to do everything that he wants you to do. And I remember sitting there in church thinking, all right, well then if you want me to keep being a professor, that means I'm gonna like get some more grants and like be able to like move and have another job offer or get tenure here. And then I was driving to work that Monday morning, and I'm pulling into the parking lot, and I just felt God say to me like, okay, look, like, yeah, that part's true, but also what if all of this bad stuff that's happened is actually what you need in order to do everything I want you to do? And that was so true. And it was like, oh, yeah, I didn't realize it at the time. I was like, okay, I don't want that to be true, but it probably is true, but I'm going to just have that be something I think about intellectually before it can really sink into my soul. But I'll at least just keep saying that to myself until I believe it. And but now, yeah, even within a couple of years of that happening, I feel like that was the day that changed my life and really cemented a lot of the purpose that brings me so much joy now.
And now looking back, I'm assuming you can reflect on how those experiences helped prepare you for this job at WashU.
Yes.
As a whole chair.
That's right. Not half chair, I'm a whole chair.
Whole chair.
Whole chair.
Yeah.
You know, I think it did because it made me fearless in some ways. Because it was like, right, if you become a professor, right, the worst thing that can happen to you is you don't get tenure.
Yeah.
And then I had to like stare that down. And, you know, you always hear it happens to other people, and you go, oh my gosh, like, what would happen if that happened to me? I don't know what I'd do. And then one day you just wake up, and that's your life, and you're like, okay, well, here we are, right? And obviously there's a lot of worse things that can happen in the world, but in that academic world moment, it was like, how am I going to pay my mortgage? Our kids are going to have to change schools, all this stuff. And it was really bad, so that made me fearless. It also just gave me so much clarity about my goals, because I had this job I had wanted for so long, and I finally had it. I was a bit different. I apparently wasn't fitting in as well as I thought I was, but I felt like in a lot of ways I was trying to be the person that the people around me wanted to. I was trying to fit in and play by the rules. And on that day I was like, well, I thought I was playing by the rules of this.
Right.
And a lot of good that did me, right? I earned all this stuff and I still got a no vote. And so that day I was just like, that's it. Like, forget that, you know. There's a lot of good in academia. There's a lot that's broken in academia. And I want my career to be about fixing things that are broken. And, you know, my group showed up and was incredibly loyal. And so I was like, okay, that's it. From this day forward, it's me and my lab, the grad students, postdocs, undergrads in my lab. Like, my first loyalty is to this group of people. And this is what really matters. And everything else is secondary. And it's just about showing up and I still mess this up all the time, but at least trying to show up and be the best leader I can to that group.
Wow.
I know I didn't actually answer your question.
No, you did. You didn't know. It wasn't really a question. It was just kind of like a realization that the Lord was actually preparing you for this role in going through all that you went through, because now you get to work with other junior faculty as well as your students in the lab. And like you said, like you went through the fire and you experienced like what's like the worst thing on the tenure track.
That definitely prepared me for, actually, you know, the biggest way it prepared me for this job is it taught me to not worry what people think. And I think that our faith, you know, there's so many things in how I approach leadership that often people are like, oh, how do you do that? And I'm like, well, like, as a Christian, you have this whole, you know, box of tools of things you can draw on in order to thrive in really difficult situations. But for people who don't have faith in Jesus, you don't necessarily have those things that you can draw on. And one of those is just, you know, if you're going to be in leadership, there's going to be a lot of times that people are really unhappy about something you do, right? That if you know, the best you can do is to say, here's my values, here's how I want to, you know, here's how I want to show up and the person I want to be, and here's what we're trying to achieve here, and I'm going to listen to people around me, I'm going to make the best decisions I can, and inevitably, there will be times when someone is really upset about one of those decisions and says some pretty horrible things to you. And I think that one of the hardest things about leadership is if you let those things sink into your soul and get to you. It's so hard, right? But to be able to say, it's hard not to. But I think that, you know, going through difficult situations, I was like, whatever, I've had way worse things said to me. It's fine, you know, that person who said that thing in faculty meeting, it's fine, whatever. But also, I think as a Christian, you can, sorry, I had a doozy this week, but as a Christian, you can show up and be like, you know what? That person can say that, but they don't get to define me.
Amen.
Like only my relationship with Jesus defines me, and only, you know, my only definition is as a child of God, and anyone else who wants to slap another label on me, that all has to do with them, and that doesn't have to say anything about me. And that's been incredibly helpful for leadership, that you can just wake up and say, you know what, I'm already enough today because I'm loved by God. I know who I am. I know where my worth lies. And I'm going to show up and do my level best to serve everyone around me and to lead by the values of our institution and by what we're trying to achieve here. And when I mess up, I'm going to apologize and I'm going to learn from it. I'm going to do better. But if that's not enough for someone, then I can still go home and sleep at night. And I don't know how I would do this job or honestly like get through these times we're living in without having faith in Christ.
Right. Well, that's such a good pivot to the book, because despite all these experiences, you still were not sure you could write a book on leadership. So in the introduction of the book, Jen starts the book by saying, I was never trained for this. And I've listened to you talk a little bit more about the process of writing the book and how you, one, didn't think you could write a book, but also that, you know, it's just like, despite all these experiences you've had, you just still didn't feel like you could package it all together and put it out in the world. So
I never thought I could write a book, because like a lot of people in the audience, you all write books all the time. This is what you do. But
well, maybe you're Abram.
See the stack of papers there? What I normally write is a scientific journal article that's like 6 pages long, right? We never get beyond like 3,000.
That's still a lot.
For us, 3,000 words is like, whoa, this is a really, really long one. And so it just felt insurmountable. But it was actually a postdoc in the lab, Dr. Shayla Shorter, who, when I was starting to think about leadership and talk about it a lot more, she said, Jen, you should write a book. And I was like, nah. And she was like, no, you really should write a book. I was like, no, I can never do that. But it was my spouse, John, who I don't think he's in the back, sorry.
Hey,
I'll
John
embarrass
made
you.
it.
We were out at dinner. You might not remember this, but we were out at dinner New Year's Eve, heading into 2019. And we got to talking about goals. And I, after a glass of wine, I was like, yeah, Shayla's telling me I should write a book. There's no way I could do it. And he said, well, what would it look like to try? I was like, oh, so anyone out there, your spouse, your kids, whatever, when they say they can't do something, you just say, what would it look like to try? Because there's no comeback to that, right? And so I was like, okay, yeah. And then, I made a plan. I was like, okay, I'm not going to commit to anything for the next year. I have way too much travel, but if I cut back my travel the next year, and I'll just outline for this year, and then I could start writing. But then, of course, that was 2019. And so I was doing great, writing a chapter a month for the first, 3 months of 2020. And then it kind of all fell apart. And then I picked it back up and then got a bit more written. And then lo and behold, I was interviewing for this job at WashU and coming here and becoming a department chair. And yeah, I see Abram laughing. We became new chairs at the same time and started that journey of solidarity. And then I was like, okay, I have to finish this book. And I think I finished it from 5:30 to 6:15 a.m. every day, being like, okay, I'm going to sit down and I'm going to not getting off this couch till I write 150 words. And if I do that 20 times a month, I will write a chapter and then I will have a book.
That's awesome. And so when you were writing the book, I'm guessing you had an audience in mind. I just learned today that the title changed.
Yes! Oh, I'm so upset about that.
But I'm curious, who the audience was that you had in mind, and then how has that evolved as you've been sort of sharing more about the book and getting feedback as well?
Yeah, I think it really came from my personal experience of just being in this trajectory where they say, oh yeah, you're being trained to do a science job, you're being trained to do a science job or a research job, and and then they're like, oh, faculty job, it's like a research job, and then you get it and you're like they lied to me. I was listening to a podcast once, it was a Henry Cloud podcast, and I'm driving along, I was actually pulling the parking garage at Emory, and it stuck with me because he used chemist as the example. And he was talking about this. He was like, yeah, say you're, he's talking about how we progress into these places that we're not prepared for. He goes, say you're a chemist. And I was like, whoa, that's oddly specific, Henry Cloud. He goes, say you're a chemist and you're a really good chemist and you're getting better and better at it. But you know what they do? They promote you. And then you're managing other chemists. And he goes, and now you have the leadership jobs. He's like, so you have 2 jobs, but you've only really been trained in one of those. And I was like, wow, Henry Cloud, my secret shame. But that was really what it came out of, was realizing that I realized I had this job that I wasn't trained for. And then when I realized that, I started asking other people, hey, have you kind of had this experience? And everyone said, oh my goodness, yes, yeah, I've had that experience too. So I thought, okay, well, I'm just going to write to that group of people, and it's there's some books out there about lab leadership, and they're great, but they're very buttoned up and serious. I was like, I'm going to write the one that's a discussion about leadership if it were a conversation between friends over drinks, right? Yeah. And hey, I wasn't trained for this, maybe you weren't either, let's get together and talk about it. And it was a bit written in that context of someone who's leading a research lab, be that in science or social science or medicine or any of those disciplines where you kind of find yourself leading a team of people. But it's been simultaneously heartening and discouraging to hear how many other fields have the same problem. And so I was in industry, I was at a company one day and gave a talk on mentorship, and throughout the whole day I kept saying, oh, well, I know you all are really good about training people to be leaders, but us in academia, we have these challenges, and somewhere around mid-afternoon, my host just goes, Jen, you talk about us like we are so enlightened, and we have all the same challenges that you all have. We have these people who aren't trained to be leaders. And then I spoke at the Carver board Carver board meeting. Someone was like, oh yeah, in law too. We have this problem in law as well. And I think it's just a universal problem that we, but then on the flip side of that, something that really struck me as I was working on the book, and probably a lot of people here, I'm sure this is no surprise, is that one of the places outside of like, you know, official like organizational psychology departments, but one of the places that's really at the forefront of talking about leadership is the church. Because, right, leadership is the vehicle by which we uphold human dignity and show kindness and do good in the world. And the extent to which, in so many ways, the church and Christian groups are at the heart of so many of the leadership conversations. And that made me so proud to be in the faith tradition that I'm in.
It's like from Labwork to the church.
There we go, yeah.
Leadership. So I know we have some questions coming in, and as I find that, I did have one last question here. Why do we need leadership skills though, Jen? Like, everyone needs these skills?
I think everyone, well, I had someone ask me this the other day. They said, well, does everyone need to be a leader?
Yeah.
Like, do we need, you know, more followers? I was like, you know, maybe not everyone needs to be in a leadership role with a title, but I think everyone needs to be a leader, because it doesn't take a title to be a leader. And really, a leader is anyone who, was it the Andy Stanley quote, is a leader is anyone who has a vision of a preferred future. Ooh. And it's really, actually the Andy Stanley Leadership Podcast is one of my favorite like leadership podcasts ever. Although it's like a little, if you listen to it in the morning, the opening line is like, leadership is a stewardship and you're accountable. Or no, it's temporary and you're accountable. I was like, whoa, that's like, if you listen to it on your way to work, you're like, that's a little rough for 7:45. But it's so true, and there's so much wisdom there. But he talks about, you know, leadership. Anyone is a leader if they have a vision for a preferred future. And so I think it's anyone who looks out in the world and sees brokenness in the world, anywhere that people are being harmed, where people are not being valued as God's creation, and says, oh, I can do something about that. And has a vision, takes action, either individually or collectively, to just do something to make the world better and to serve humanity. That's leadership. Right? Because you're leading change, and that's one of the things we need most. And so I think as we think about ourselves, as we think about our students, it's, you know, showing them that, you know, we can all be leaders. And in fact, we probably all have a responsibility to be leaders. And that probably brings us right back to where we started with purpose, that, you know, so much of our purpose is in leading in whatever domain we find ourselves.
Yeah, and I think thinking of ourselves as potential leaders would actually make us better empathizers of leaders, because it's one thing to like have, you know, an idea of like what is a preferred, like, I don't know, future for something, and then, you know, but it's easier to be a complainer just behind the keyboard, just like critiquing everything. It's like, I know the answers, but you don't want to step up and do it because you know it's hard. So I think if we all thought of ourselves as, you know, if we want to make a difference, that I could be a leader, then, you know, I think it helps you realize how much you'd need to sacrifice to do that, but also how vulnerable you have to be in your admitting your failures and things like that. So
that is spot on.
All right, Jen. All right, we have some questions here. Right. So you teach, you write, research, you lead, all the things. How do you find a work-life balance, and how do you have any time management tips? Work-life balance while doing all the things.
Well, I think that the thing about work-life balance, right? Actually, my former colleague when I was at Utah, Nalini Nadkarni, she had a great way of saying this. She's like, you know, balance doesn't exist. She said it's like if you've ever been on one of those little like Bosu ball or whatever balance balls, right? Like you never hit a point where you're like, oh, I am perfectly balanced, right? And if you do, then the next second you're like flying off of it to the side. And that life is like that too. And it's just about finding, you know, she said it's about avoiding too much imbalance for any one time. So it's recognizing like, yeah, you might have that week that, a big project is due, grant is due. You have to grade a huge pile of exams or whatever that might be, and maybe you work a lot that week, but then the next week you take it easier. Or so like travel a lot, which I enjoy traveling, but I miss my family a lot. But then I can balance that with being home in other seasons. And so I think, kind of finding those ways to avoid imbalance and find a balance that works for you. I think also you have to avoid perfection and embrace imperfection. And realize that, like, all right, no one ever gets to do anything to the exact perfect level that they want to, and we all have to draw the line somewhere, and you end up just drawing it out of necessity, and you have to do the things to take care of yourself to be a healthy whole person. Otherwise, none of the rest of it matters. And then within the rest of it, it's like, okay, I'm going to do this to the best of my ability within the time that I have, and then that's going to have to be good enough.
Yeah, I think also surrounding yourself with people that can give you honest feedback on those like seasons when like you're not doing so well in terms of like, whether it's finding a balance or like I think about how when I didn't realize this, but it does make sense because the spring semester at the university, at least for me in our department, just always feels like it's intense because you're dealing with, your regular teaching, research, and then you have your seniors who are going through a lot of emotions because there's so much pressure. They're trying to graduate, but they're seeing their colleagues that have jobs, and then they don't have a job, and then they're it's like, woe is me? Like, what is life? What am I going to do after college? I'm going to miss college, but so you're dealing with so much. I didn't realize I was carrying a lot of that with me until one time my husband was like, oof, here we go. It's a spring semester. I was like, what? How, but he'd been like tracking and he could tell.
Wow.
Every spring semester, and the spring comes around, you think, oh, the weather is changing and it's pretty and it's nice. But for me, it was like, oh, things were so stressful. So I think having people around me that could like point that out actually helped because now it's like I was going into that spring semester with this mindset, okay, it's intense, but it doesn't have to be like this grueling experience. Like, let's embrace what this season is bringing, but also let me think about how I can like work through.
Yeah, and you can like make a plan for that. I think that's one of the big things is like you have to, like I work out first thing in the morning because then like some days as a chair, all you do is answer email, it feels like. And so then I'm like, okay, I did one productive thing today, right? But it is like those things you want to make sure you do is to actually just like plan them. And that actually a really hard lesson I learned recently, and once I realized this, I was like, oh, I have no excuse to not do this, but I still don't, is that I feel like there's this, you always feel like you're like, if I just had one day with no meetings where I could do all my work, I would like be caught up, right? Like I'm like one day away. But then I look at my calendar and I'm like, okay, well, a couple days a month I go travel and give seminars. That's one day that's just completely blocked out on my calendar and has nothing on it. Like that's not magical. That's just like I mark that out and I'm traveling and I'm meeting with people all day. And so I literally can't be booking other things that day. And then I thought, well, what if once a month I just marked myself out and made that my magical one day to get caught up, but yet I still don't do it. So I need to, maybe by saying that out loud here, I'll do it. But the other great, super practical, and I gotta share this, I have a professional coach, and she was like, okay, Jen, if you don't get it done or something comes up, you can't just do more. You can't just keep up. She was like, you need to, it's the 3 Ds. Now I'm probably gonna forget one. Delegate, delay, or delete.
Oh.
I was like, oh, that's really good.
Delegate,
delay, delete. Like if you're planning to get all these things done today and then something totally out of your control comes up, most of the time, maybe like 1 time out of 10, you can be like, okay, I just have to work late and get this done. But you can't do that 10 times out of 10 or even 5 times out of 10. So instead you need to say, okay, what was I supposed to get done or what am I supposed to get done tomorrow that I can either give to someone else or I can say, okay, instead of doing it this week, I'm gonna get that done 2 weeks from now, or that's just not gonna happen. It's like that email for your zero inbox. It's that email that's been clinging to the bottom of your inbox for like a year, and you stare at it every time you go there, and then finally, like on the 1-year anniversary, you're like, look, if I haven't answered, you're like, delete. It's gone, right?
That's great. All right, here we go. Another question. How and when do you apologize in leadership?
one line that is going around these days in leadership is never apologize. Don't
Yeah.
admit your wrongdoing because it makes you look weak. And it weakens your authority.
That's so good. And I think that is such a myth, right? You know, certainly you can apologize or share about failures or any form of vulnerability. You can do that in a way that does weaken people's respect for you. And you can also do that in a way that builds people's respect. And I think that, wow, in our world right now, the one thing that is probably most lacking in a lot of places in leadership is humility. But as people who know who we are in Christ and have that, you know, once again, I think that our who we are in Christ gives us the ability to do that because it allows us to say, wow, I know who I am, that I am far from perfect, I am broken. I don't like the word sinner because I grew up where that was like really misused, but we're sinners, and but we're these broken, fallen people. But then also simultaneously in Christ, we're redeemed and we're whole and we're already enough. And when we can embrace both of those things, it allows us to have that humility and vulnerability to be able to apologize. And I don't know, I feel like that's so essential. Well, I'm going to say this and we're going to edit it out too. But
Edit.
anyone around Wash U, like we've just been aching for someone to be like, you know, this whole student workday thing is our bad.
It's not good.
Like that would go so far. And I think that they finally did say they in a very subtle way.
And so they did?
They finally said it was a mistake. They said we've tried to prevent other people from making the same mistake, but that went so far. People just needed to hear that. They just needed to feel validated. And actually something in leadership, I think it's, you know, often admitting a mistake shows that you know, people just need to know that you've learned from it. And but it's so hard to do still.
It is, and you know, it's interesting because I think of another like COVID times when we talk like public health was put on the map in a lot of ways because there was a lot of mistrust and distrust in our health institutions that emerged because just, you know, we would say one thing one day and then it would turn out to be the other thing. And I feel like now public health is trying to reflect and see what they could do differently. And one of the things that we've been talking about is, have I not been clear? This sounds very different. Oh my goodness. We've been talking about how do we repair and rebuild trust where it's been lost. And I think a lot of trust was lost during the pandemic. And I was listening to a talk here last week, and Dr. Caitlin Jedalina, she's an epidemiologist, said how trust is not something that you declare, it's something that's demonstrated over and over again, and it's okay for us to tell people that we don't know the answers yet. It's okay for us in science to say, as of right now, the evidence is pointing to this, that could change tomorrow. And that stuff, I think in a lot of ways, people would have maybe been more forgiving if during COVID we had been a little bit more honest about just the complexity of the ever-evolving nature of that virus. But on this theme of just like thinking about faith and leadership, there's a question here that actually does a good job of having us explore this a little bit more. It says, how does faith shape your sense of leadership? And how do you translate those lessons about leadership to people who don't share your faith? At a place like WashU.
I mean, I think that at WashU we have all the more opportunity to have a strength in our leadership through our faith, and it's through all of the qualities that gives us, that sense of, you know, if you can wake up every day and say, you know what, I'm already enough, right? Like before we even got out of bed, right? You're already enough, and you don't have to earn your worth today. But then that actually gives you the ability, you know, gives each of us the ability to then go into our day and already be filled up, and that we're enough. And so we can spend our day pouring into other people instead of trying to like get enough affirmation or enough anything to build ourselves, to fill ourselves up. And so I think in so many ways, like it's a real strength. But back to where you started, what it means to be a leader and be a Christian, I think it just means a totally different type of leadership. That it's not about power or authority or position or achievement, but rather about this vocation of finding brokenness in the world and restoring it to wholeness, and where, the brokenness is everywhere around us, but then wholeness looks like every person being treated with dignity and respect, and uplifting and serving humanity, and creating that place where everyone can thrive. And so in a leadership role, you have the ability to just do a lot of really tangible things that create that reality in little small ways, and then to make a lot of mistakes too, right? Obviously all the time, but there's so many times when you're like, oh, I see a problem and I can actually do something about that. I see this brokenness and I can, working with other people, we can make this a little bit more whole. And so I think leadership paired with that vision of our vocation in this world is a tremendous opportunity. And even, like, I don't go into faculty meeting and, like, throw the Bible down on the table in faculty meeting, but I think you don't have to. That I think, we're all created to want that sort of, to want to live in that sort of world. And so often, just showing up and being that type of leader is something that even if people don't know or don't agree with, or frankly don't like the reason why we lead in that way. I see this in so many other leaders sitting in this room right now, and all over the place. Even if people don't agree with the reason, they usually like the outcome. How many people are like, I want a super authoritarian leader who's really selfish, and no one wants that, and so it's a chance to just, and I think that's like a tremendous source of purpose then.
Louisa, where's Louisa? Can we sneak in one? Okay, Louisa's not here. All right, one more question. This is the last one I think could close us out really well. What do you think your students make of a department chair who's also an out-of-the-closet Christian? Have you heard any rumblings?
I haven't. I mean, I will say, on a really fun, happy note, when you're at a secular university, right, you don't necessarily want to, like the students come in. So actually a great story. When I was at Utah, we would go on these recruiting visits to the smaller schools all around and talk about grad school and talk about our research. And the very first one I ever got to go to was to BYU, Idaho. And it was a lot of fun, right? I drove up to Rexburg. And I think I knew that this was going to happen because my department chair had told me. But before you give your seminar, they pray for you, which was amazing, right? I was like, way cool. Like, that's awesome. This moment of silence to reflect, to pray, to be like, hey, let's make this a really enlightening sort of thing. But I also in that moment remember thinking, oh my goodness, I can only imagine how some of my colleagues reacted to this when they came here and they were doing this. So, I think those moments are really fun, but being at a secular university, right, that's just not like, students don't come to your office hour and like let's sit down and pray before we get going. But I think that it's almost a more powerful opportunity for everyone here to show our students what the love of Christ looks like, right? No matter what they believe. And so that's actually something, I promise we did not plan this as like an advertisement for the Carver Project, but I've said this before, that this is the power of the Carver Project, is that you can be that like kind of out Christian, but in a sort of subtle way. And like students don't need a sermon when they come to your office, but if they know that you're a Christian, they know that you're someone that they can talk to about faith, or they're looking, it's a bigger responsibility because they're looking to all of us to be leading through our faith, whether that's leading in the classroom, leading a department, leading in a lab. But so it feels like a big responsibility, but it's a lot of fun. It's one of the things about going to a campus church too. I remember John saying that he's like, I think word has gotten out that like there's these 2 chemistry professors who go to One Family Church, and that's us. And
nice.
and so it's just really, it's a fun opportunity to have a way that students know that they can come and have those conversations with you, and that that we can give credit to Christ for, whenever we're able to do good things in this world.
I think this free ad for the Carver Project is a good place to stop. Let's help me thank Jen for taking the time.
Thanks for having me. This was so fun.
Awesome. So Louisa, we're heading to cookies and a reception, but there's also, Jen has there's some books out there. Feel free to grab yourself a copy of Labwork to Leadership. Don't be afraid of the lab in this book. It's for everyone, and hang around, mingle, and thank you all for being here tonight.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thanks, Jen. I did it.